Snow drifted thick and silent over Seattle, blanketing the hills above Lake Union in a muted white glow. The Cole mansion stood like a shard of glass against the night sky, its steel edges reflecting the city lights below. Inside, the silence was absolute until the front doors opened and Adrian Cole stumbled through his white shirt, slashed open blood seeping between his fingers. Each step he took left a small red smear across the marble floor. His breath came shallow and uneven. The meeting had ended in chaos, the betrayal had been fast, and the knife wound faster. The men who had cornered him in the parking garage thought they had left him to die, but Adrian Cole had made a living by outsmarting death and competitors alike. He reached the security panel, voice hoarse. Disable all systems, no logs. The AI obeyed without question. The mansion fell into silence again, lights dimming to a soft amber. He leaned against the wall, trying to steady himself. The pain was sharp now, radiating across his abdomen. He pressed harder on the wound, muttering under his breath. Not here, not like this. But his body disagreed. His knees buckled, the world tilted, and he collapsed, the sound of shattering glass echoing through the atrium as a wine decanter crashed beside him. Blood spread across, the pale marble rich and dark like spilled ink. Outside, Lena Hart parked her small beat-up Corolla by the gate. She'd finished her shift hours ago, but had realized she left her house keys on the counter by the kitchen island. The snow was falling harder now. She jogged up the stone path, rubbing her gloved hands together, her breath fogging in front of her face. The glass walls of the mansion glowed faintly from the inside, a strange flickering light moving across them. "That's weird," she murmured. She knocked once, then again. No answer. The third time, the door creaked open. "Mr. Cole." Her voice echoed softly. The air inside smelled faintly of metal, and something worse, iron, sharp and unmistakable. Her eyes adjusted, scanning the wide hall, and then she saw him. Adrian Cole, the billionaire everyone whispered about, lay sprawled on the floor, blood spreading beneath him. Her training kicked in before the fear did. "Oh my God, sir, can you hear me?" She dropped her bag, slipping on the marble as she ran to him. His eyelids fluttered open. He looked at her like she was part of a dream. "It's swelling." So fast he rasped. The wound on his side pulsed with heat. She yanked open the nearest drawer, looking for anything, nothing. She tore off the inner lining of her skirt and folded it into a thick strip, pressing it against the wound. Blood soaked through instantly. He groaned, his hand twitching toward hers. "Stop," he whispered. "You shouldn't." She cut him off. "You'll bleed out if I don't." The AI system buzzed faintly in the background, a voice saying, "Emergency medical override disabled." Lena ignored it. She pressed harder, her palms slippery with blood. "Stay awake," she said firmly. "Look at me." He forced his eyes open, their steel gray color dulled by pain. "Who told you to come back?" "No one," she answered. "I just forgot my keys." His lips twitched in what might have been a broken smile. Bad timing. She exhaled sharply. "Lucky for you." She adjusted her grip, watching the color drain from his face. "You're burning up," she muttered. "The swelling's bad. You need stitches." He let out a weak, humorless laugh. "You're not a doctor." "No," she said, voice steady. "But I used to be a nurse, before I couldn't afford to keep helping people for free." The silence between them thickened, filled only by the hum of the heating vents and the faint whistle of wind through the glass. Lena tore another strip from her skirt, reinforcing the bandage, her breath trembling. The marble beneath them was slick, cold, and red. He watched her work, dazed, half-conscious, until finally his voice came again, softer, more human. "Why are you still here?" She didn't hesitate this time, because someone has to be. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the snow pressed against the glass like a heavy curtain, the city beyond erased in white silence. The only sound was his labored breathing and the faint creak of the fire beginning to catch in the distant fireplace. Lena stayed where she was kneeling beside him, her hands trembling as she kept pressure on the wound. The billionaire who built machines to save lives was bleeding out on his own floor, and the woman society had forgotten was the only thing keeping him alive. As his eyes finally closed, she whispered, "Don't you dare die on me." The clock above the fireplace ticked once, marking the second that everything changed. Morning light broke through the storm, slicing across the glass walls of the mansion. The snow outside glowed faintly pink in reflection of dawn. Inside, silence reigned again, except for the low hum of the heating vents. Adrian Cole stirred on the leather sofa, eyes fluttering open. The world around him blurred and shifted before coming into focus. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and smoke. His abdomen ached with a sharp pulsing heat. When he looked down, he saw a makeshift bandage wrapped around his waist, a rough strip of fabric torn unevenly, now darkened by dried blood. He blinked once, twice, trying to remember how it got there. Then he saw her. Lena Hart stood near the window, clutching a mug of coffee with both hands. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her uniform was wrinkled, her hair pulled back loosely. The moment she noticed him awake, she straightened. "You're alive," she said, almost surprised. Adrian's voice came out rough. For now. He sat up slowly, wincing as the pain flared. "Who told you to do that?" She frowned. "Do what, stay?" His tone was flat, stripped of warmth. "You should have left me there." "You were bleeding out," she said. "I didn't really have time to ask for permission." He looked away, jaw tightening. "You saw too much." The statement hung in the air like a blade. Lena blinked. "Too much of what? Of me," he said simply. He pushed himself upright, ignoring the tremor in his hands. "This doesn't leave the house." She crossed her arms. "You mean the part where your blood's on your floor, or the part where you almost died because you refused to call for help?" Before he could respond, the door chimed softly. The security system rebooted overnight registered movement. "Perimeter breach," the AI announced. "Identified Dr. Nathan Rowe." Adrian's expression tightened. "Open," he ordered. Moments later, Dr. Rowe stepped into the foyer, shaking snow off his coat. His sharp blue eyes went immediately to Adrian, then to Lena. "Jesus, Adrian, you look like hell," he said. "What happened?" Adrian adjusted his shirt, hiding the wound beneath the bandage. "A minor incident. Handled." Rowe frowned. "You call that handled?" His gaze shifted to Lena. "Who's this house staff?" Adrian replied, before she could speak. She was just leaving. Lena stiffened. "Actually, I wasn't." The two men stared at her. Rowe raised a brow. "Excuse me?" "He was half dead last night," she said, gesturing toward the sofa. "If I hadn't come back, he'd be a headline by now." Rowe's eyes narrowed, scanning her face, then the faint bloodstain on her sleeve. "You treated him, yes," she said simply. "With what? What I had?" Adrian cut in, voice low. "Enough." Rowe turned to him. "You need a hospital." "No." "Adrian, I said no." His tone was final cold, the one he used in boardrooms and battlefields alike. Rowe exhaled, frustration flaring. "You can't hide this. Someone came after you." "Didn't they?" Adrian said nothing. the silence confirmed it. Lena looked between them, realization dawning. Wait, you were attacked. He didn't answer. His eyes drifted toward the floor where faint red streaks still marked the marble. Ro sighed. She's already seen everything. Let her stay for now. The system can't run full lockdown with someone injured. Adrian's jaw flexed, but he nodded once. Fine, temporary, until the AI reset completes. Lena glanced at him. You're welcome, she said softly, her sarcasm barely hiding the shake in her voice. He ignored it, limping toward the window. The morning light carved harsh shadows across his face. Do not mistake this for trust, Miss Hart. You're here because it's convenient. Right, she said, folding her arms. Convenience looks a lot like gratitude these days. Ro watched the exchange with quiet curiosity. You two finished. He motioned toward the wound. I'll have a private medic sent in. No one else, Adrian said firmly. This stays contained. Why? Lena asked. Because vulnerability gets you killed. Adrian replied without hesitation. The words hit harder than either of them expected. The rest of the morning unfolded in silence. Lena cleaned the floor, replacing the blood-stained towels, her movements brisk and quiet. Adrian sat near the fireplace, typing one-handed on a sleek black laptop, his expression blank, but his skin pale. Every so often he caught himself glancing at her reflection in the glass. There was steadiness in her that made him uneasy. She didn't ask questions, she didn't look afraid. That unsettled him most. At noon, the AI's calm voice filled the air. Security reset complete. Background check anomaly detected. Lena Hart, former registered nurse. Terminated from St. Mary's Hospital, cause insubordination. Adrian looked up sharply. Explain. Lena froze. I saved a patient who couldn't pay, she said quietly. The hospital wanted the bed for someone with insurance. They called it interference. Ro glanced at Adrian. So she's not a thief. Adrian didn't respond. He just studied her for a long moment before closing his laptop. You'll stay in the guest wing, he said finally, until this is over. Lena hesitated. Is that an order or an invitation? It's neither, he replied. It's damage control. She exhaled, nodding. Fine, I'll keep you alive until you decide to stop being your own worst enemy. His lips twitched, almost a smile. That could take a while. She turned away before he could see her smirk. Outside, the wind picked up again, snow swirling against the glass. Inside the mansion hummed quietly, a living machine with two strangers trapped inside it. He didn't trust her. She didn't understand him. But somewhere between fear and defiance, a strange balance began to form. When Lena passed by the sofa later that evening, she noticed something small, left behind, a single crimson handprint fading into the marble. She crouched down, wiping it away gently. Beneath the faint stain, the stone was smooth and cold, like everything in his world. Upstairs, Adrian watched from the balcony, eyes unreadable. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone in his own house. He didn't know yet if that was salvation or danger. The storm didn't stop for 3 days. Snow piled high against the windows, muffling the world outside the glass mansion. Inside, the silence was thick, the kind that felt almost alive. Lena moved quietly through the rooms each morning, vacuuming, dusting, and checking that Adrian's bandages stayed clean. He worked from his office in the basement, a windowless lab filled with glowing monitors, humming servers, and silence that seemed to stretch forever. He barely spoke, and when he did, it was clipped, efficient, like he was addressing one of his machines. Still, she noticed small things. The way his hand trembled when he reached for his coffee. The wince that crossed his face when he thought no one was looking. The shadows under his eyes. He hadn't slept well since that night. One afternoon, while dusting the shelves in his office, she saw him pause mid-typing. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, his face tightening in pain. He pressed a hand against his abdomen, then forced himself upright. She hesitated in the doorway. "It's infected," she said quietly. He didn't turn around. "You're a maid, not a medic." She crossed her arms. "I used to be a nurse before the hospital fired me." That made him look at her, really look. His voice dropped. "Why?" "Because I didn't let a patient die when the system said it was time." She said, her tone flat, but eyes burning. "Insurance ran out. I kept the ventilator on." They called it interference. The silence that followed was long taut. He finally said, "You disobeyed the rules." "I followed humanity," she replied. "There's a difference." His eyes lingered on her a moment too long. Then he turned back to his screen. "You talk too much." "Then stop listening," she said, her voice light but firm. For the first time, he almost smiled. That evening, she brought him dinner, simple soup, reheated but warm. He didn't look up as she placed it on his desk. "You can leave it there." She hesitated. "You should eat it while it's hot." He sighed. "You're persistent. You're impossible," she said softly, then walked away. When she returned an hour later, the bowl was empty. Days passed like this. A strange rhythm settled between them. He worked, she cleaned, neither admitting the other's presence mattered. The storm outside softened into drizzle, and Seattle returned to its gray, familiar self. Yet inside the mansion, the air was still thick with tension and something unspoken. One night she found him sitting in the living room, long after midnight, staring at the dark reflection of the city lights on the glass wall. His laptop sat open beside him, untouched. "You should be resting," she said. "You're still healing." He didn't look at her. "Healing's a luxury," he muttered. She stepped closer. "So is dying alone." That made him turn his head. "Why are you still here, Lena?" "Because someone has to make sure you don't bleed out from pride." His lips twitched again, that almost smile returning. "You're not afraid of me, should I be?" "Most people are." "I'm not most people," she said simply. "You should have figured that out by now." The wind outside howled softly. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You think I don't know what you're doing." "Cleaning up your mess," she said. "You're welcome. You're trying to fix something that's broken beyond repair." He said, his voice low. "That's what you do, isn't it? Find things to save?" She met his gaze evenly. "And you find reasons not to be saved." He exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh, but not quite. "You have no idea who I am," maybe she said. "But I know what you are right now, a man who's bleeding under 1,000 layers of armor." The words hit harder than either of them expected. He stood suddenly wincing as pain shot through him. "Go home, Lena." She didn't move. "You need to change your bandage." I said go, and I said sit down. Her voice was steady, calm, not loud, but undeniable. He froze, then slowly sank back into the chair. She stepped closer, kneeling beside him. Her hands were sure and gentle as she unwrapped the old fabric, revealing the wound. The swelling had gone down, but the edges were still raw and angry. She cleaned it silently, the only sound the soft hiss of alcohol and his sharp intake of breath. "You're lucky," she said quietly. "The infection didn't spread." "I make my own luck," he replied. "You make your own suffering," she said. He looked down at her, her face illuminated, by the faint light from the fire. "You're not afraid to talk back. Fear doesn't heal anything," she whispered, taping the bandage in place. For a moment they stayed like that. Him sitting still, her kneeling beside him, the world around them, small and fragile. He could smell the faint scent of soap in her hair, feel the warmth of her hands against his skin. It was the closest thing to human contact he'd felt in years. "You should go home," he said again, softer now. "It's late." She stood meeting his gaze. "You should eat something. Pride burns calories." And then she left the sound of her footsteps fading down the hall. He watched her disappear into the shadows, the corners of his mouth softening. For the first time he realized he didn't want her to leave. Not yet, not while the silence still felt this alive. Upstairs, Lena paused outside her room, her hands trembling. She leaned against the door, closing her eyes. The image of him, strong, stubborn, and quietly broken, lingered behind her eyelids. She wasn't supposed to care. He was her employer, her complication, her impossible reminder that compassion didn't come without consequence. And yet, somewhere deep inside, something had already started to shift. The days that followed unfolded like scenes from a silent film, each one a repetition of gestures that slowly became ritual. Lena woke before dawn, making coffee strong enough to fill the vast echoing kitchen with its scent. Adrian would already be in his office, the blue glow of his computer screens reflecting against the glass walls of the mansion. He worked in shadows, his focus unbroken, his voice heard only in brief commands to the AI or the occasional terse phone call with board members. She cleaned quietly, her movements measured, her presence steady, like background music. Yet beneath the surface of their routines, something invisible grew, something that neither dared to name. On the 5th morning, she left a note beside his untouched breakfast. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. "You can't heal what you refuse to feel." He didn't react at first, but the next day, the same note appeared again, taped near his computer monitor. He stared at it longer this time before crumpling it and tossing it in the bin. When Lena returned that evening, she found it smoothed out again on his desk, unfolded, as if he'd changed his mind. She said nothing, but she smiled to herself as she vacuumed the living room carpet. Their unspoken rhythm continued. She brought him meals, he ignored them until they went cold. She replaced the bandages on his side twice a day, checking for infection, while pretending not to notice how his gaze lingered on her hands. The wound was closing, but the scar beneath the surface was not. Every night the mansion glowed faintly golden from within the lake outside, reflecting its light like liquid glass. Sometimes Lena would stand by the window after her chores, watching snow dissolve into rain, the city's reflection distorted on the water. Once she caught Adrian standing in the same place on the opposite side of the glass wall, staring out into the same darkness. Neither spoke, but for a moment they were mirrors of each other, two figures trapped in the same silence. A week passed before she found the courage to ask what had really happened. It was late, nearly midnight. She'd brought him tea instead of coffee, thinking he needed rest more than caffeine. He looked up from his screen, eyes tired, voice hoarse. "You don't have to keep doing this," doing what she asked softly. "Pretending you don't care," he said. The words caught her off guard. "Maybe I just don't like watching people self-destruct." "You think I'm self-destructing." "No," she said after a pause. "I think you're hiding in plain sight." He leaned back in his chair, studying her face, as if searching for something he'd lost long ago. You think you can fix me?" "No," she said. "I think you're the only one who can." The air between them thickened. The sound of rain tapping against the glass filled the silence. For the first time, he didn't look away. "You don't know me, Lena. Maybe not," she said, her voice quiet, steady. "But I see you." That night he didn't sleep. He sat alone in the dark, the words echoing in his head like a heartbeat. "I see you." He hadn't realized how long it had been since anyone said that to him. Not since his wife's funeral. Not since the press tore him apart for the accident his company's AI had caused. The world saw his money, his power, his downfall, but not him. Until her. The next morning he found her in the garden room dusting the bookshelves. The room had belonged to his late wife, now frozen in time. Sunlight filtered through the frosted glass, scattering across her hair. "You shouldn't be in here," he said from the doorway. She turned, startled. "I was just cleaning. No one touches this room. It's covered in dust. Let it be." His voice cracked slightly enough for her to hear the tremor beneath the authority. She set the duster down and stepped closer. "You keep everything the way she left it, don't you?" He said nothing, but the silence was an answer. "You think if you freeze the world," she continued softly, "nothing else can die." His eyes hardened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe not," she said, "but you're living in a museum of ghosts." He looked away, his jaw tight. She thought he'd yell. Instead, he whispered, "You sound like her." The words stopped her cold. "She used to say things like that," he added. "And I never listened then, either." The silence that followed was heavy with memory. Then, almost too quietly, he said, "You should finish your work." She nodded, leaving him standing alone in the sunlight, surrounded by dust and ghosts. That evening, when he came to the kitchen for water, he found fresh flowers in a vase on the counter, white tulip. They were his wife's favorite. Lena was nowhere to be seen. He stared at them for a long time before reaching out to touch one, its petals trembling faintly under his fingers. The next morning, another vase appeared in the foyer, and another in the office the day after. He didn't ask where she got them. He didn't throw them out either. Slowly, the mansion began to feel different. The hum of machines softened under the weight of small human things. A sweater folded neatly on the armrest. A light left on in the hallway. A faint melody hummed under someone's breath while cleaning. One night, Adrian came down to the kitchen and found her there barefoot, wearing one of his oversized flannel shirts as a makeshift robe. She froze when she saw him. "Sorry," she said. "Couldn't sleep." He nodded, leaning against the counter. "Neither could I." The rain outside drummed gently on the roof. They stood there, two insomniacs in the half-light, surrounded by the scent of coffee and quiet. "You work too much," she said. "It's all I know," he replied. "Then maybe it's time to learn something new." He tilted his head. "Like what?" She looked at him, her eyes soft but unwavering. "How to live." For a moment, his expression shifted, vulnerability flickering like a candle behind the steel of his face. He wanted to say something, but words failed him. Instead, he poured her a cup of coffee. She took it with a small smile. "Truce?" he asked. "For tonight," she said. When she went back to her room, he stayed in the kitchen, staring at the half-empty cup she'd left behind. A single lipstick mark clung to the rim. It shouldn't have meant anything, but somehow it did. The next morning, he found another note by his laptop. "Healing takes more courage than pain." He didn't throw this one away. He slipped it into his wallet next to a photograph of his wife that he hadn't looked at in 3 years. Outside, the snow had melted completely. Inside, something else had begun to thaw. The storm returned without warning, sweeping across the city in sheets of cold rain that lashed against the glass mansion like an endless drumbeat. By evening, the power flickered twice before the backup generator kicked in, bathing the rooms in a dim amber glow. Adrian was in his study, staring blankly at the financial projections flickering across his monitor. The numbers blurred. His head felt heavy, his vision hazy. He tried to focus, but his hands trembled. When he finally stood, the world tilted. The wound on his side burned again, a deep ache spreading beneath the stitches Lena had so carefully placed days ago. He cursed under his breath, pressing a hand to it, but when he pulled away, his palm was streaked with blood. Not again, he muttered, trying to steady himself. He barely made it out of the office before his knees gave out. He hit the edge of the staircase, sliding down the first few steps, before stopping halfway, gasping for air. His pulse thundered in his ears. The house felt too warm, the light too bright. He tried to call out, but only a dry whisper came. Lena was upstairs folding laundry when she heard the sound, a dull thud, followed by a faint groan. She dropped the sheets and ran. The sight that met her at the top of the stairs made her heart jolt. Adrian lay halfway down the staircase, pale, drenched in sweat. One hand gripping the railing, the other clamped over his abdomen. Blood had already soaked through his shirt again, dark and spreading fast. Oh my God. She breathed, racing down to him. Adrian, can you hear me? He opened his eyes weakly. It's swelling again. He murmured, his voice fading. The stitches must have... He didn't finish. She slid her arms under him, bracing his weight against her shoulder. Come on, she whispered. Stay with me. The generator hummed overhead as she dragged him to the nearest sofa. Her hands moved on instinct. She tore open his shirt, revealing the wound, red, angry, swollen around the edges. The stitches had ripped open, blood pulsing out in slow, thick beats. She pressed her hand down hard, feeling the warmth seep into her skin. You're burning up, she said, panic edging her voice. You have a fever. His eyes half closed, his breathing shallow. Don't call anyone, he managed to say. I don't need you need help, she snapped. You need me to do this. She grabbed the medical kit she'd tucked away after the last time, fumbling for antiseptic thread and gauze. The air in the room felt suffocating. Rain hammered the windows. The fire flickered low. She knelt beside him, wiping the sweat from his forehead with her sleeve. Adrian, look at me, she said firmly. You need to stay awake. He groaned softly. Why do you care? The words were barely a breath. She froze, then looked at him. Really looked at him, at the exhaustion, the defiance, the pain. Because no one cared when my mother was dying, she whispered. Someone has to break the pattern. He stared at her for a long, dazed moment. Then something inside him cracked. His eyes filled, and for the first time since she'd met him, tears spilled over. I tried to save her, he whispered, voice raw. The car she... His words dissolved into a choked breath. It was my code, my fault. I built the thing that killed her. Then this is your second chance, Lena said softly, pressing a new pad of gauze against the wound. Don't waste it. She sterilized the needle in the flame of a candle. Her hands steady, though her heart raced. This will hurt, she said. He nodded weakly. Do it. The first stitch made him gasp, his fingers gripping the armrest hard enough to whiten his knuckles. She worked quickly, silently, each pull of the thread, closing another piece of the wound. Sweat rolled down his temple. The fever made his skin glisten in the candlelight, his breath coming ragged and shallow. "Breathe," she murmured, her voice trembling but gentle. "You're doing fine." He tried to smile, but his face twisted in pain. "You're bossy," he managed. "Someone has to be," she whispered. She finished the last stitch and tied it off, then cleaned the area, her touch careful, tender. When she reached for the blanket to cover him, his hand caught her wrist. "You're shaking," he said weakly. "I'm fine," she lied. He let go, his eyes fluttering shut. "You're not," he murmured, "but you stayed." She sat beside him, wiping her hands, clean exhaustion, finally settling into her bones. His breathing slowed, steadied. The fever still burned, but the bleeding had stopped. For a while neither spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence between them. "You should rest," she said softly. "You need to fight the fever." "I've been fighting everything my whole life," he murmured. "Maybe that's why I'm tired." "Then stop fighting me," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Let me help." He looked at her, then eyes glassy with fever, but clear with something deeper. "You already did." She leaned her head against the back of the couch, her heart still racing. The firelight flickered across his face, softening the lines of pain. For a long moment, the only sound was their breathing, hers. Quick, his slow and labored. Without thinking, she reached out, brushing his hair away from his forehead. His skin was hot to the touch, his pulse still rapid under her fingertips. "Please don't die on me," she whispered. "I'm not losing someone else." His hand moved weakly, finding hers. "You're not losing me," he said, barely audible. "Not yet." The clock ticked past midnight. She stayed by his side, sponging his forehead, changing the compress every hour. Outside, the rain softened to a slow drizzle, the wind finally quieting. The fever broke just before dawn. His breathing eased, his body relaxing for the first time in days. When she leaned in to check his temperature, she realized he was watching her. "You didn't leave," he said quietly. "I told you I wouldn't." "You could have," he said. "Most people do." She met his gaze, her voice steady. "Then maybe you've been around the wrong kind of people." His lips curved faintly, almost a smile. "Maybe." He closed his eyes, and this time it wasn't to shut her out. It was to rest. She sat there for a long time, watching him sleep, listening to the quiet rhythm of his breathing. For the first time since she'd stepped into his world, the house didn't feel cold. It felt alive, wounded, imperfect, but alive. As the first light of morning touched the glass, she stood pulling the blanket higher around him. Her hands lingered on the edge of the fabric. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "You have to be." Upstairs, the world began to wake. The soft hum of the heater, the faint vibration of a phone, somewhere in another room. But in that living room, surrounded by the ghosts of his silence, something fragile and undeniable had been born. The billionaire who refused to bleed had bled after all, and the maid who shouldn't have stayed had saved him again. The fever broke, but the silence that followed was heavier than before. Adrian spent most of the next day asleep, his body weak, but his mind restless beneath the surface. Lena checked on him every few hours, changing the cold compress, making soup he barely touched. By evening, his breathing was steady, and she finally allowed herself to rest. She wandered the mansion's endless corridors, the hum of machines filling the quiet. That was when she noticed a faint vibration beneath her feet, like a low heartbeat pulsing through the floor. It came from the east wing, an area Adrian had always kept locked. The door to the server room. She hesitated only a moment before curiosity won. The keypad beside the door blinked softly. When she pressed her hand to the scanner, the screen lit up. Access granted, the AI chimed in its calm, synthetic voice. She froze. He hadn't revoked her clearance. That meant something. She stepped inside. The room was colder than the rest of the house. Rows of servers lined the walls, blinking red and green in rhythmic precision. The air smelled faintly of ozone and metal. At the center stood a console with multiple monitors, one still active. Lines of code scrolled down endlessly, streams of data from a program labeled Project Solace. The name rang a bell. She'd seen it mentioned in one of the news reports about the self-driving car accident that had killed Adrian's wife. She moved closer, her breath fogging the glass. A folder on the screen read "Accident Logs, Restricted." Her fingers hovered over the mouse. She shouldn't, but her heart said otherwise. She clicked. A video filled the screen. The timestamp read October 14th, 2021, 22:34. The dashboard camera of a sleek black sedan came into view. The AI voice narrated calmly, autopilot engaged. Then headlights appeared, oncoming traffic, veering across the line. The steering should have corrected automatically. It didn't. The sound of tires screeching, glass shattering metal, twisting. A woman's scream, then darkness. The playback stopped. Lena stood frozen, her stomach twisting. She rewound the footage, noticing a single line of code, flashing red before the crash. It was a failure in the decision algorithm, a line marked Cole AI. Override disabled. She understood immediately. The machine hadn't malfunctioned. It had followed orders. Someone had disabled the manual override remotely. Someone inside the company. "Oh God," she whispered. A voice came from behind her. "You shouldn't be in here?" She turned sharply. Adrian stood in the doorway, pale but upright, his shirt half-buttoned, eyes dark and unreadable. She stepped back, her heart pounding. I heard something. I didn't mean to." "You found it," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but there was something hollow beneath it. "You saw everything." "What is this, Adrian?" she asked, gesturing to the screen. "Why would anyone turn off the override?" He walked toward her slowly, each step deliberate. Because the algorithm was designed to protect the highest probability of survival, meaning it calculated that saving one life, hers, would cause more fatalities overall. It made a choice. "But machines don't make moral choices," she said, her voice shaking. "People do." He stopped beside her, staring at the frozen image of the crash. "You're right," he said. "People do. And I built the machine that killed her." His hands clenched at his sides. "I thought I was saving the world. I thought logic could replace empathy." The silence between them was suffocating. Lena looked at him, her voice soft. "You've been torturing yourself ever since." He didn't answer. She moved closer. "You can't live in punishment forever, Adrian. You have to forgive yourself." He turned sharply, anger flashing in his eyes. "Forgive myself. For what, playing God? For deciding who gets to live?" His voice cracked. "I killed her, Lena." She shook her head. "No, you lost her. That's not the same. Don't pretend to understand." "I do," she said. "My mother died because the hospital chose money over mercy. Different story, same system." He stared at her, breath uneven. The weight in his chest finally broke loose. "Do you know what the worst part is?" he whispered. "The world doesn't care about guilt. They only care about headlines. So I built this prison to hide in. I kept the truth buried with her." "Then why are you showing me this?" she asked quietly. His jaw tightened. "Because maybe I'm tired of hiding." The power flickered again. the hum of servers deepening. The storm outside had grown violent lightning, illuminating the glass walls in jagged flashes. Lena looked around, then back at him. You can still make it right. By confessing, by being human again. He laughed bitterly. You make it sound easy. It's not, she said, but it's possible. He turned toward the screen one last time. The board doesn't know. They think the error was random. If this file ever went public, Coal Dynamics would collapse. Thousands of jobs, billions in research. He trailed off. And yet Lena said you'd finally be free. He looked at her, something raw flickering behind his eyes. You don't understand what it means to lose everything. Yes, I do, she said. But sometimes losing everything is how you start over. For a long moment, neither spoke. The storm raged around them, thunder, echoing through the mansion. Adrian stepped closer, his voice low. You saw the worst of me and didn't run. You weren't the worst of you that night, she said softly. You were just broken. The tension between them shifted less like confrontation, more like confession. His breath hitched, as if the weight of years finally pressed too hard to bear. Go, he said finally. Leave this room. Forget what you saw. I can't, she said. Then hate me, he whispered. It's easier. No, she said, shaking her head. What's killing you isn't hate, it's guilt, and you can't bury it forever. She turned and walked toward the door. When she reached the threshold, she paused, looking back. Pain untreated always comes back, she said. Then she left. Adrian stood alone in the humming dark, the server's light reflecting off his face like cold fire. On the screen, his wife's last moment flickered one final time before the system went black. For the first time in years, he felt something crack inside a fracture where the numbness had been. Upstairs, Lena packed her things quietly. She couldn't stay. Not now. The truth she'd seen wasn't just about him, it was about the world they both lived in, one that traded humanity for perfection. She left a single note on the kitchen counter before walking out into the storm. You can't heal in a place built to forget. Behind her, the lights of the mansion dimmed the AI's voice, fading into silence. Inside, Adrian Cole sank to the floor of his server room, head in his hands, listening to the distant echo of rain against glass, and the ghost of her footsteps leaving him behind. The next morning, the mansion was silent again, but this silence was different. It wasn't the cold stillness of luxury or the routine quiet of machines. It was the absence of a heartbeat. Lena was gone. Her room was empty, except for folded linens and a note Adrian hadn't yet read. He stood at her door, holding the paper between bloodless fingers. You can't heal in a place built to forget. The words pierced deeper than any wound. He sat down on the edge of her bed, staring at the neat handwriting until his vision blurred. Outside, the lake was gray, the sky heavy with rain. He should have felt relief. Instead, the house felt like a tomb again. Hours passed before Dr. Nathan Rowe arrived unannounced, shaking off his umbrella at the doorway. You look like hell, he said, setting his briefcase on the counter. And this place looks worse. Adrian didn't respond. She's gone, Rowe said, scanning the hall. You let her go. Adrian looked up slowly. She left. Rowe frowned. Good. She was trouble. She saved my life, Adrian said quietly. Twice. And she might be the reason you lose everything, Rowe countered. He tossed a file onto the table. Your rivals have been digging. Someone leaked internal data. If that file you've been guarding ever goes public, you're finished. Adrian's face hardened. Lena wouldn't or didn't, Rowe asked, his tone sharp. because an anonymous report just hit the press this morning about ethical breaches in coal dynamics. It's vague for now, but it's enough to draw blood. Adrian's chest tightened. You think she's behind it? I think she cares more about right than rules, Rowe said. And that makes her unpredictable. He stood pacing the room. If she wanted to expose me, she already would have, Adrian said. No, this is someone else, someone who wants control. Then you better figure out who fast, Rowe said, because they're coming for you. By evening, the sky turned dark again. Adrian sat in his office, staring at the flickering screens. Messages flooded in from board members, legal advisors, journalists, words like suspension, investigation, liability. He muted them all. The only sound left was the wind against the glass and the echo of his own heartbeat. Then came the sound of engines outside. Not one, but several. He moved to the window, parting the blinds just enough to see headlights cutting through the fog. A line of black SUVs crawled up the driveway, their beams slicing through the mist like knives. His phone buzzed. Rowe's voice came through low and urgent. They're here. Don't open the door. Who are they? Grayson Tech, Rowe said. They're making their move. They'll force you to sign over your research before the press eats you alive. They can't do that. They already are. The first knock echoed through the house, loud and deliberate. Adrian's security system flickered on automatically. Unauthorized visitors detected the AI intoned. He disabled it again. There was no point pretending the system could protect him. The second knock was harder. Adrian Cole, a voice called out from outside, smooth, confident, familiar. We know you're in there. Let's make this easy. We just want to talk. He recognized that voice. Marcus Voss, CEO of Grayson Tech, former partner, now his enemy. Adrian's jaw tightened. You picked the wrong night, he muttered. He reached for the drawer beneath his desk and pulled out a handgun, a relic heavy and cold. He checked the magazine, his hands steady. He wasn't going down without a fight. The third knock came, followed by a deep voice. Adrian, open up. You're bleeding resources. Let us help. He almost laughed. Help. That word had lost its meaning. The power flickered again, plunging the mansion into half-darkness. The only light came from the fire and the faint glow of the server room down the hall. He moved quietly toward it, his shadow gliding across the walls. Outside footsteps crunched through the snow. He heard murmured voices, the metallic click of weapons being loaded. The glass walls that once gave him power now made him vulnerable, transparent in his own fortress. Then a sudden sound from behind a knock, softer this time. He turned sharply, gun raised. The door to the side entrance opened slowly. A figure stepped inside, soaked and trembling. Lena. For a moment, time stopped. She looked at him, her face pale, her eyes full of fear. They're coming, she said breathlessly. I saw them on the road. You need to move. Why are you here? He demanded. Because I couldn't let you die, she said. Not like this. You leaked it, he said quietly. Didn't you? She shook her head, rain dripping from her hair. No, I warned someone to protect you from the board, but they turned it against you. Who, Marcus Voss? He wants solace. His eyes widened. He doesn't even understand the technology. He doesn't have to, she said. He just wants your name destroyed. Another crash outside. Glass shattered in the foyer. She flinched. He stepped forward, grabbing her arm. Upstairs. Go, I'm not leaving you. You don't get to argue this time, he said. But she didn't move. You'll be outnumbered. I've been outnumbered before. The front doors burst open, cold air rushing through the hall. 5 men entered, dressed in black, armed. Marcus Voss followed his smile, faint, his tone almost polite. "Adrian," he said, "you're making this harder than it needs to be." "You brought guns," Adrian said. "You brought secrets," Voss replied. He stepped forward, motioning for his men to spread out. "Sign the transfer of ownership, or I'll take it from what's left of you." Adrian raised his weapon. "You'll have to earn it." The air crackled with tension. Then a single gunshot shattered the silence. One of Voss's men went down screaming. Lena ducked behind the table as chaos erupted. Bullets tore through the glass walls, shards raining down like glittering rain. Adrian fired back, his movements precise, despite the pain in his side. The sound of gunfire echoed across the mansion, deafening. Lena crawled across the floor toward him, heart pounding. She reached for the fallen man's weapon, firing once, twice, missing the target, but drawing their attention. Adrian caught her eye and shook his head, but she ignored him, reloading with trembling hands. The last man standing fired toward the server room. Sparks erupted as bullets tore into the wires. The lights flickered, alarms blaring. Voss shouted over the noise, "Enough, you'll kill us all." Adrian fired one last time. The bullet struck Voss in the shoulder, spinning him backward. He crashed into the wall, sliding to the floor. "I told you," Adrian said, through gritted teeth, "you picked the wrong night." The men retreated, dragging Voss with them, their boots leaving trails of blood across the marble. Outside, the sound of engines roared to life. As they fled into the night, silence returned slowly, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the hum of the dying servers. Lena crawled toward Adrian. He was on one knee, gun slipping from his hand, his shirt blooming red again. "You're hurt," she whispered. "It's fine," he said, though his voice was faint. "No, it's not." She pressed her hand over the wound, blood warm against her palm. "You can't keep doing this." He looked at her, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. "You came back." "I told you I would," she said, her voice trembling. The AI flickered back to life, its voice soft. Warning system integrity compromised. Adrian looked up at the smoking servers. "Everything's gone," he said quietly. "No," she said, meeting his eyes. "Not everything." Outside, dawn began to break. Over the shattered glass, the sky painted silver and red. Inside, amidst ruin and chaos, 2 people knelt in the wreckage of a life built on secrets, and for the first time, neither was running from the truth. The mansion burned quietly at first. Sparks hissed along the floor near the damaged servers, smoke curling up from the shattered cables like black ghosts. Adrian didn't notice it until the smell hit him, sharp, metallic, unmistakable. He turned, coughing, as the faint orange glow grew brighter behind the glass walls. "We have to go," Lena said, gripping his arm. "Now." He staggered to his feet, blood seeping through his shirt again. The wound from the fight had torn open, staining his side crimson. The data, he rasped. If the servers go, everything goes with them. "You'll go with them if you stay," she snapped. The fire alarm blared, red lights flashing across the room. Outside, the wind howled, feeding the flames. The AI's calm voice cracked through the static, warning. "Structural integrity compromised. Evacuate immediately." But Adrian hesitated, staring at the monitors flickering with fragments of his life's work. Lines of code images of his late wife projects, meant to heal and help, all swallowed by fire. He reached toward the nearest console, but Lena pulled him back. "Adrian," she said, her voice breaking. "It's not worth dying for. It's all I have left. No." She whispered, tears in her eyes. You have more. She took his hand, pressing it to her chest. You have this. You have now. Something in her voice cut through the noise. He met her gaze, saw the same fire reflected there, alive, real, human. Then another explosion shook the house. The ceiling above them groaned, a beam cracking under the heat. She grabbed his arm again, dragging him toward the corridor. Flames licked up the walls, the sound like 1,000 whispers. Come on, she gasped. He stumbled, coughing hard, but followed her through the smoke. They reached the staircase just as part of the roof gave way, showering sparks around them. The air grew thick, unbearable. Lena's lungs burned. She covered his mouth with her sleeve, guiding him down the steps. But halfway, his leg gave out. Go, he said hoarsely. Get out. Not without you, she said. You'll die if you stay. Then I'll die trying to save what's left. No, she said fiercely. You'll live trying to save yourself? He looked up at her eyes, glassy from heat and pain. Why are you still here? He whispered. Because someone has to be, she said, echoing the words that started it all. She hooked her arm under his, dragging him again. The smoke thickened until the world turned orange and gray. The marble floor beneath them was slick, streaked with soot and blood. They made it halfway across the foyer when the chandelier above them snapped free, crashing down with a deafening shatter. Lena screamed, diving forward. The edge of the glass grazed her arm, slicing deep, but she didn't stop. Adrian tried to push himself up, his strength failing. Leave me, he choked. No, she said again, her voice raw. Not this time. She tore a piece from her dress, pressing it against his wound to slow the bleeding. He winced, the contact burning. It's swelling again, she murmured, her tone desperate yet gentle, repeating the first words he'd said to her that night. He gave a faint, pained smile. You really shouldn't quote me in moments like this. Shut up, she whispered. And breathe. The fire roared behind them, devouring everything in its path. The heat was unbearable now, a living thing that seemed to chase them through the halls. They stumbled toward the glass wall facing the lake. Outside, snow still fell, melting as it touched the hot surface. We're trapped, he said, coughing hard. There's no way out. Lena looked at the wall, then at him. Maybe there is. She grabbed a heavy metal chair, swinging it hard against the glass. It cracked but didn't shatter. She swung again. Lena, he warned the fall. We'll take it together, she said. One more swing. The glass exploded, outward shards flying into the cold night air. The rush of oxygen fed the flames behind them, sending a wave of heat that nearly knocked them off their feet. Without hesitating, she looped his arm over her shoulder. Hold on, she said. You're not dying in here. You'll freeze out there. Then we'll freeze together. And with that, she pulled him through the broken wall. The cold hit them like a slap. They tumbled onto the snow-covered ground, rolling as the air filled with the hiss of steam where snow met fire. Adrian gasped, the shock of cold numbing his pain. He lay there for a moment, staring at the burning mansion reflected in the lake's surface. Flames rose through the broken roof, lighting up the night sky. It's gone, he whispered. Everything. Not everything, she said again, kneeling beside him. Her hands were trembling, her dress-torn hair tangled and wet with snow. You're still here? She pressed her palm over his wound again, trying to stop the bleeding. Stay awake, she pleaded. Adrian, look at me. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. You came back, he murmured, voice fading. I never imagined someone like you would. Then start imagining again, she said, tears freezing on her cheeks. Because I'm not leaving. In the distance, sirens wailed police fire trucks, ambulances growing louder. The light from the flames danced across their faces, flickering between despair and salvation. Lena leaned closer, her forehead resting against his. "You're not allowed to die tonight," she whispered. "You've already died once. That's enough." He exhaled his breath, misting in the cold. "You saved me again." "Maybe," she said softly, "but this time you're going to save yourself." The sirens drew nearer their reflection, shimmering in the lake beside the burning house. Adrian turned his head weakly, watching his empire collapse into smoke. For the first time in years, he didn't feel fear, he felt release. As firefighters rushed toward them, Lena still held his hand tightly, her body shielding his from the snow. "You're safe now," she said quietly, though her own body trembled from exhaustion. "You made it." "No," he whispered. "We made it." She looked down at him, and despite the chaos, despite the ruin, she smiled. The snow fell heavier, blanketing the ground, in white muffling the sound of destruction behind them. For the first time since his world had burned years ago, Adrian Cole let himself be still. The billionaire who refused to bleed was alive, and the woman who stayed had saved more than his life. She had given him a reason to live. The world returned in fragments, beeping monitors, the low murmur of voices, the faint scent of antiseptic. Adrian opened his eyes slowly, blinking against the sterile white light above him. He was in a hospital bed, tubes running from his arm, his chest bandaged tight. For a moment he couldn't remember how he'd gotten there. Then it hit him, the fire, the glass breaking Lena's voice, cutting through the smoke. He turned his head, grimacing at the pain that lanced through his side. And there she was. Lena sat slumped in the chair beside his bed, her hand still clutching his even in sleep. Her hair was messy face, streaked with soot, but she was breathing. For a long moment he just watched her, the rise and fall of her chest, like the only steady rhythm left in a world that had finally stopped spinning. The door opened quietly. "Doctor." Rose stepped in, wearing his usual half-frown. "You look like hell," he said, his tone softening when he saw Adrian awake. "But at least you're alive." Adrian's voice was rough. Lena Rowe nodded. "She's been here since they brought you in." Refused to leave even when they told her she needed stitches herself. Adrian looked back at her, guilt and gratitude twisting together inside him. "Is she okay?" "She's stronger than both of us," Rose said. He sighed, pulling up a chair. "The mansion's gone. The fire took everything, your servers, your research, the patents. Coal Dynamics is officially under investigation." "So it's over," Adrian said quietly. "Maybe not," Rose replied. "That girl saved your life and your reputation. Turns out she contacted a journalist before the attack. Someone she trusted to prove Grayson Tech was behind the sabotage. The authorities have enough evidence now to clear your name." Adrian stared at him, stunned. "She did that, she did," Rose said. "And she nearly died doing it." Silence filled the room for a moment, broken only by the hum of machines. Adrian leaned back, exhaustion settling over him like a blanket. "What about Marcus Voss in custody?" Rose said. "Turns out the man couldn't keep his own secrets any better than you." He paused. "You were lucky, Adrian. You lost everything but somehow got everything that matters back." He stood, patting his shoulder. "Rest. You'll need your strength for what comes next." Then he left, leaving Adrian in the soft quiet of the hospital room. He turned his gaze back to Lena. Her fingers twitched in her sleep, still holding onto his, like she was afraid he'd disappear. He smiled faintly. "You're unbelievable," he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open at the sound. "So are you," she murmured, her voice hoarse. "Though you have a terrible sense of timing." He chuckled weakly, the sound breaking the stillness. "You saved me." "You would have done the same," she said. "I wasn't sure I could," he admitted. "You didn't have to be sure," she said. "You just had to try." He looked at her for a long time, the weight of unspoken things hanging between them. "I thought losing everything would destroy me," he said finally. "But it feels like maybe that's what it took to start over. Sometimes the ashes are the only place new things can grow," she said softly. "Even a heart, even a broken one, especially a broken one." A nurse entered briefly, adjusting his IV, then left them alone again. The light outside had softened to gold, the first rays of sunrise cutting through the window blinds. Lena stood stretching, wincing slightly at her bandaged arm. Adrian frowned. "You should be in bed." "I'm fine," she said, brushing it off. "You always say that," he replied. "And you always believe me," she said, smiling faintly. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sunlight creep across the floor. "When I first met you," he said, "I thought you were just another person passing through my world. And now," she asked, "now I think you're the only part of it that was ever real." Her breath caught. She looked down, fingers tightening around his hand. "Don't say that unless you mean it." "I mean every word," he said, his voice steady. "You saw the worst of me and stayed." "I saw the truth of you," she corrected. "And truth isn't always pretty, but it's worth saving." He smiled. Then a real smile, small and fragile but alive, the kind that hadn't touched his face in years. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," he echoed. "Now I rebuild. Not a company, not a legacy, just something honest." "And what about me?" she asked quietly. "You're part of that," he said, "if you'll stay." She tilted her head. "I thought you didn't want anyone to see your weakness." "I don't," he said, "but I want you to see me anyway." Her eyes softened. "Then maybe you're already healed." They sat like that for a while. Sunlight warming the room, the smoke of the past dissolving into something gentler. Outside the window, snow still clung to the edges of the city, but the light had changed. It was no longer gray, but golden fragile and full of promise. Later that afternoon, reporters gathered outside the hospital. Cameras flashed, voices shouted demanding statements about the fire, the scandal, the future of coal dynamics. Adrian ignored them all. He signed over the company to an independent trust dedicated to ethical AI research, ensuring his wife's death would not be in vain. Then he asked for a car, not to return to the office, but to take him and Lena to the lake, the same one that reflected his burning mansion just nights before. When they arrived, the air was cold and clear. The snow had melted along the shoreline, revealing stones blackened by fire. Adrian stood quietly, his breath fogging in the air. Lena joined him, her arm looped gently through his. "It's strange," he said. "Even after everything, this place still feels like home." "Maybe it's not about the place," she said. "Maybe it's about the people who survived it." He looked at her, then the wind tousling her hair, the pale light reflecting in her eyes. "You shouldn't have come back for me," he said softly. "But I'm glad you did. You'd have done the same," she said. "No," he replied, "not before you. You taught me how." They stood there as the sun sank low, painting the water in hues of rose and gold. For the first time, the reflection didn't show fire or ruin. It showed two people standing side by side, fragile but unbroken. He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining effortlessly. "What now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "we see what survives the light. 1 year later, the city of Seattle woke to a spring morning that felt different. The air was softer, the lake calm, and the glass towers downtown reflected not power, but renewal. At the center of it all stood a modest building with a simple sign in silver letters, the Ward Foundation. Side sunlight streamed through the wide lobby windows, illuminating photographs on the walls, patients' families, and stories of lives changed. It wasn't another tech empire. It was something more human. In one corner office, overlooking Lake Union, Adrian Cole adjusted his tie, the same one he had worn when he launched his company years ago, but now it felt symbolic, a reminder rather than armor. He no longer led Cole Dynamics. He led a movement. The foundation provided medical coverage for low-income patients who had fallen through the cracks, people like Lena's mother, whose death had once broken her faith in the system. Now that same pain had been turned into purpose. The door opened softly. Lena stepped in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She wore a simple cream blouse and a lanyard marked Director of Community Outreach. "You still take it black," she said, setting a cup on his desk. "Some habits refuse to change. Some are worth keeping," he said, smiling. "How was the interview?" "Exhausting," she said with a grin, "but worth it. The local paper's running a piece on the new scholarship program." "Good," he said. "People need to see that redemption isn't just a word." She leaned against the desk, studying him. "You sound like someone who finally believes it." He looked out the window, where the lake shimmered in the light. "Maybe I do. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm running from ghosts." "That's because you stopped hiding from them," she said. "And because you made peace with the fire." He chuckled softly. "It's strange how destruction can be the beginning of everything." "It's not strange," she said. "It's life." The door opened again, and Dr. Rowe stepped in, looking uncharacteristically cheerful. "You two are becoming the poster children for healing," he teased. "I just came to tell you the city approved your grant extension." "That's incredible," Lena said. "How many more clinics can we open?" 3 to start, Rowe said. "And one of them will be named after your mother, Lena." She froze emotion flashing in her eyes. "After my mother," Rowe nodded. "You earned it. Both of you did." Adrian watched her pride and tenderness mingling in his gaze. "Thank you, Nathan," he said quietly. "Don't thank me," Rowe replied. "Thank the woman who refused to leave you bleeding on the floor." Then he turned to go. "And for the love of God, try not to burn anything else down this year." When he was gone, Lena laughed softly, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. "He's never going to let us live that down." "He shouldn't," Adrian said. "It's the best story we have. The one where you almost died. The one where we both came back to life." She smiled, shaking her head. "You always did have a flair for dramatics, and you always had a way of saving me from them," he said. She looked down at her coffee, her voice quiet. "I didn't save you, Adrian. You saved yourself. I just reminded you how." "Maybe," he said, "but I wouldn't have remembered without you." Outside, a group of volunteers began setting up a banner for the Foundation's anniversary gala. Children laughed as they helped tie ribbons to the railings. The sound filled the air like a melody simple and pure. "It's hard to believe," she said. "A year ago, that mansion was burning, and now look at this." "That mansion was never home," he said. "This is." He walked to the window, his reflection merging with hers in the glass. "You know," he added, "I never gave you back that piece of your dress." She looked up surprised. "You kept it, of course," he said. "You tore it to save my life. It's framed in my office downstairs." She laughed. "You're impossible." "And you," he said softly, "you never gave me back my heart." She met his gaze, eyes shining. "That's because I don't plan to." They stood there in silence, the city alive below them, the past and present weaving together into something whole. For the first time, the silence between them wasn't about pain, it was peace. Later that evening, the Foundation's gala filled the main hall. Guests from hospitals, universities, and patient families gathered under strings of warm light. Adrian gave a short speech. No slides, no statistics, just truth. "We built machines to make life easier," he said, his voice calm measured. "But what truly saves us is not what we create. It's what we choose to feel." "A year ago, I thought logic could replace love. I was wrong. It took losing everything to learn that healing doesn't come from perfection. It comes from compassion." The crowd fell silent. Then applause erupted, not polite, but heartfelt. He stepped back, eyes finding Lena's across the room. She was smiling, her hands clasped together, tears glinting in the soft light. After the gala, the two of them walked outside onto the terrace overlooking the lake. The water shimmered with the reflections of city lights. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked. "The fire." "Every day," he said, "not with fear, with gratitude. For surviving, for being found," he said. She looked at him, her voice gentle. "You were never really lost, Adrian. You were just waiting to remember what it felt like to be alive." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You made sure I did." The night air was cool, but neither moved away. "You know," she said softly, "you're not the man I met that night." "No," he agreed. "I'm the man you made me remember I could be." They stood there as the wind rippled the lake, the sound of laughter and music drifting from inside. He looked up at the stars and then back at her. "You taught me something no algorithm ever could," he said. "What's that?" she asked. "That the heart isn't a problem to solve, it's a promise to keep." She smiled through her tears. "Then keep it well." He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers, their breath mingling in the soft spring air. This time he whispered, "The swelling isn't pain. It's the heart learning how to live again." She closed her eyes, a single tear falling down her cheek. "Then let it live," she whispered, "for both of us." The city lights glimmered on the water, and somewhere in the distance, a piano played a slow, tender melody that drifted through the night. In that moment, surrounded by everything they'd built from ashes, Adrian and Lena stood together not as savior and saved, but as equals bound not by guilt or loss, but by love that had survived the fire and chosen to begin again. And now, if this story reached you even in the smallest way, take a moment, just breathe. Think of the last time you saw someone breaking in silence and did nothing. Think of the last time you wanted to help but hesitated because it wasn't your place. The truth is, kindness is never out of place. It's the quiet rebellion that saves lives when the world looks away. Adrian Cole thought strength meant control. Lena Hart thought compassion had no power. But they both learned that healing begins the moment someone chooses to stay. Maybe tonight that someone can be you. Somewhere a neighbor hides behind a door of pride. Somewhere a friend scrolls through endless feeds, waiting for a sign that they matter. Somewhere a mother skips her own medicine so her child can eat. You can't fix every wound, but you can reach one heart. That's enough to start a change. So before you go, I want you to ask yourself, who in your life needs to be reminded that they're seen? Who needs to be forgiven, even if that person is you. At Emma's Stories, we don't just tell about love, we tell about redemption, the kind that doesn't always arrive with roses or rainbows, but with bruised hands and trembling hearts that keep trying anyway. Because love isn't always loud, sometimes it's just someone showing up when everyone else walks away. If this story made you feel something hope, ache, gratitude, don't let it fade. Share it. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if you've ever met your own Lena or Adrian, someone who changed your life when you least expected it. And if you haven't yet, believe me, you will. Because love in all its quiet forms always finds a way. Rate this story from 1 to 10. Not for us, but for you to remind yourself how much you still believe in compassion. You're rating your words. They help others find stories that remind them they're not alone. So if your heart is still swelling from what you just heard, that's not pain. That's the pulse of something alive. Let it stay. Let it grow. And when you finish this video, don't just scroll away. Do one small act of kindness today. Text someone you've lost touch with. Smile at the stranger who looks tired. Say thank you to the one who keeps showing up quietly. Because no story truly ends when the screen fades to black. It continues in what you do next. You have the power to turn fiction into something real. We built Emma's Stories for people who still believe in the second chance. The broken smile, the trembling hands that reach again, even when it hurts. If you're one of them, you're home here. Subscribe, stay, and come back tomorrow for another story that might remind you of who you once were or who you could become. And as always, thank you for listening, for feeling, for staying till the end. Because somewhere in this world, there's another person pressing play right now, hoping for a story that makes them believe again. Maybe your comment will be the one that gives them that reason. Maybe your voice will be the echo of hope they've been waiting for. Until next time, take care of your heart and someone else's too. Because like Adrian and Lena learned, healing doesn't start in a hospital or a mansion. It starts when one person whispers, "You're not alone." And in that moment, everything changes.